Hey, Dr. John. Recently, we've had a number of our clients who have had rotator cuff tears. Is that significant?
Yes, rotator cuff tears are very significant.
Dr. John, do you have experience with rotator cuff tears?
Yes, I have experience treating, evaluating, and diagnosing rotator cuff tears. I performed numerous surgeries on rotator cuffs, as well as published numerous articles on rotator cuffs themselves.
Could you please explain to us the relevant anatomy for a rotator cuff tear?
In order to understand the relevant anatomy of the rotator cuff tear, let's look at the anatomy of the rotator cuff itself. So first here, let's look at this first slide. In this first slide, what we're looking at first on the right side is the bony anatomy. So all the skin and all the muscles have been removed. Where the arrow points to the glenohumeral joint, that's actually the area where the shoulder moves. It's also been termed in layman's terms as a ball and socket joint. If we then look at the left part of this particular slide, they've added some muscles and tendons and other structures to this slide so that we can better understand the rotator cuff. The rotator cuff actually inserts into the humerus or the ball part and starts or originates in the scapular or glenoid part to help depress the shoulder.
Could you please share with us what is the function of the rotator cuff?
So the rotator cuff, among its functions, includes its work as a depressor of the ball with the ball and socket joint. As a depressor, it helps hold that shoulder in place when you move the arm in space.
For our clients who have rotator cuff tears, what are the symptoms that they should be looking out for?
Symptoms of a rotator cuff tear include pain, sometimes weakness, especially pain when you try and reach over your shoulder or above your head. Oftentimes, you can also have some atrophy or shrinkage of the muscle towards the back of the scapula.
How are rotator cuff tears diagnosed?
So rotator cuff tears are diagnosed primarily by the doctor's clinical examination. But one of the objective things that a doctor can order is something called an MRI. If we take a look at this next slide, here we're looking at an MRI that shows on the arrows where the bone is located, and then there are other arrows that show where the muscle and tendon is located. In this case, the muscle and tendon represents the rotator cuff. The rotator cuff itself is made up of a supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis.
Who are the right specialists to treat a rotator cuff tear?
The best specialists to treat a rotator cuff tear are orthopedic surgeons. They're trained in identifying rotator cuff tears and following guidelines to surgically repair them when it's necessary.
Hey, Dr. John, for our clients who have rotator cuff tears, what kind of treatment could they expect?
Clients who have rotator cuff tears can get treatment that ranges from non-operative treatment to surgical intervention. Non-operative treatment includes things like physical therapy, where we try and strengthen and maintain the range of motion in the shoulder. But when those measures fail, then operative treatment is often necessary. Operative treatment involves repairing the tendon back to the bone. One way to think about the rotator cuff tear is think about the rotator cuff as a rope. That rope is attached to the bone. When a tear occurs, that rope actually detaches from the bone, and the repair itself tries to put that back together. If we look at the next slide, this is an example of the rotator cuff surgery. Basically, a camera is placed inside the shoulder, and then in another portal or incision, other instruments are used to help repair the rotator cuff.
Are rotator cuff tears caused by traumas?
Yes, rotator cuff tear, there are a number of different types of mechanisms where rotator cuff tears can occur. One type is through trauma, typically some kind of forceful trauma that involves movement at the shoulder joint. Sometimes a rotator cuff can have some pre-existing degenerative changes, and then when a trauma is added to that, it can cause a tear.
For our clients who have rotator cuff tears, what can they expect in the future?
So clients who have rotator cuff tears can have various expectations depending on the degree of tear and the degree of healing that has occurred. If the tear has been repaired and the client has normal healing, then you can expect normal function and minimal pain. If, however, the repair doesn't hold or doesn't stay, then sometimes some clients can have continued pain and ongoing weakness related to the rotator cuff tear itself.
Hey, Dr. John, thank you.
You're welcome, Mark.